years. Hey, I'm still Vince. And I still have been publishing the Riverwest Currents for over 20 years. We started actually as a newsletter of the YMCA, and then I got some funding to turn it into a tabloid from the Metropolitan Milwaukee Fair Housing Council. So on your screen, I'm going to just go into the paper itself. I want to show you the first issue. I'm going to go through just a couple of issues that kind of show what the paper is if you're not familiar with it, and what our vision and mission was. Basically, we wanted to represent the neighborhood in a way that made people familiar with the things that were going on here and the opportunities, and that this was a good place to live, work, and play, and to record it. What has become is a history of the neighborhood that's fairly extensive. This has been coming out every month, and there's a lot of stuff that in here. The first issue is on the screen, if you can see it. It says reservoir no longer needed, and it's an aerial photo of the reservoir park, which overlooks the river, and that was serviced to distribute water to the entire neighborhood. So when we started, I was able to use some of the money that we got to start the paper to hire a son, young Knaus. She's now in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, with her husband, Dan Knaus, who actually did and still helps me with the web presence for the paper. Sonia was educated as a journalist, so it was really a great relationship to start with her. And the first paper was kind of slim. It was 12 pages, all black and white. But the cover story was, I think, fairly significant in that this reservoir and this issue played a role in the neighborhood and the adjacent neighborhoods for quite a few years. Donna Schleiman wrote about Kilbourne Reservoir Park in its history in this issue. Donna passed away, but she led the campaign to preserve reservoir and the park in its form, to preserve the hill, because they didn't need this reservoir anymore because we had better pumps than they did in the actually the middle of the 19th century when we first started using this reservoir for water for drinking in the city. So it was really a good choice of an issue. This is a letter from the editor, and you can see over on the right here some of the first people that helped Sonia, myself. Tess Reese was very instrumental in when we started doing sales right away to help support the paper. And almost all these people, Jan Christensen, Kevin, Yvonne Gordon, Carl Hedman, Ken Leinbach, Eric Peterson, Jim Poliak, Peter Reese, and Tom Schneider, Tanya Cormarty Twaddle. And I don't really remember who Patrick Weishampel is. And Maureen Kane did the original layout, and Dan is now up in Canada. We published 5,000 papers. We had just a newsletter before that. Let me get this back up. Nope, it's not the one. Sorry. We had just a newsletter before that. In the letter to the editor here, from the editor, that is, she talks about how the paper had started 3 years earlier with Gene Gerasi and myself out of the YMCA. I proceeded to kind of move the paper away from the Y because it was becoming clear to me that I wanted this to be not so much associated with a nonprofit, but to be an independent source of news and information for Riverwest and the adjacent area. You'll see a couple other stories here. The Riverwest Co-op just opened a few months before the paper started to publish, and they're still in existence. They just celebrated their 20th anniversary as well. There's a story about Center Street Bid. And if maybe some of you know Carl Hedman, he's a retired philosophy professor, but he was also very active in co-ops. Outpost was in Riverwest and in a smaller form in a couple different locations. Carl Also was active in the Gordon Park Co-op, which was on Locust Street, which is now Garden Park, a green space that we have. And if you know Carl, maybe you would appreciate what he's trying to say here. There's a quote from Carl: "Until recently, I had come to believe that the first decade of the 21st century would be a period where good people continued to retreat into their private lives, licking their wounds." So Carl was very happy that the things that were going on in River West, and particularly the co-op formation. In the lower corner, we had a Valentine's dance. Um, it was at the Gordon Park Pavilion to raise money for the co-op. Notice in the lower left-hand corner of this page, the Gordon Park Pavilion just opened up. And there's a story about a woman and uh, her, her, her business. And then there's a figure called Eudaimon. Now, Eudaimon is a mythical character. It's actually an alter ego of mine. I started to write this and I pretended like I'd walk around the neighborhood and write my experiences in the third person. I really enjoyed doing that. It's based on a character from Moravia called Radagast, which is where my uh, maternal ancestors came from. And it was this strange kind of woodland creature. And I told T. Krulos to do a drawing after describing it. And this is what he came up with. Looks like a hillbilly with an axe and a bird on his shoulder, drinking a beer. One of the features that we started relatively soon, this is from the 2004 issue, is the neighbor spotlight. This particular, so there's been one of these just about every month. So that means there's over 200 neighbor spotlights. It's been a very popular feature. And my vision right now at this time is to publish all of these together in a book. The photos at this time were taken by a professional photographer whose name escapes me for a second. But we also received some of the money that we received meant we should translate some of the stories into Spanish. And you can see in the lower corner that this was Spanish. So this gives you an idea of the range. There's only 11 here. In February, Peaches and Coco wouldn't let us take their picture. I think that's the only time that happened. But you can see January, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, and December. And these bring back strong memories for me. The April uh, picture right here is, maybe you can see my little hand go on there, is John Lindquist. He was an activist and a Vietnam vet against the war. He was married, he got divorced, he married somebody from England. I just saw him this summer down the block at Black Husky Brewery. He's recovering from cancer from Agent Orange. But he looked really happy. It's great to see John Lindquist around. You can see the variety of people that we sponsored. The hands up here are Dr. Dave. He's now in Colorado, I think, still chopping up vegetables, and a very healthy oriented guy. And over here we got with the dog, we have, that's Mike Frumming, and I still see him walking dogs down the paths along the river and the Beer Line Trail. And Andy and Shelley, Shelley was the first employee of the co-op, and Andy did a whole lot of work with a lot of people to make that particular thing go. Okay, so here we have, this is we're up to two. So we started in 2002 as a tabloid, and by 2004, you can see we have a lot of color, we have more pages and a lot of activity. This is 1 year celebrating in January all the things that happened in 2003. There's a little text at the bottom. Richard Penny was playing at the Center Street Festival. There was Rocker Box, which was put on by Fuel Cafe, which just kind of closed recently. The Milwaukee River is one of the reasons why I'm here, and where I worked for 15 years doing restoration activities along the Milwaukee River. Number 4 is Marina Lee, who's down in the lower part here. She had these peace sculptures that she did. And Nancy Sense was Lady Liberty and promoting shopping at the co-op at the 4th of July. And over here, the bishop is dedicating St. Casimir as Our Lady of Divine Providence when they rearranged the Catholic parishes. And I think this is Milwaukee Public Theater doing stuff at the Locust Street Festival with the drummers, and the Riverwest Accordion Club is in the middle with Sarah Kozar, who has passed away, unfortunately, but there's all these memories of all these great times that we had over the years. Tom Schwark and Texas Dave are playing at Garden Market, which has moved to Pierce Street now, but that's still going on. The belly dancers were part of the Center Street art cart race. They were on a cart and then they started the belly dance, and the guys in the X cart just got transformed by by that. The Summer of Peace celebration in Gordon Park, the celebration of the Milwaukee Rowing Club opening up their launch and deck in their new facility on the river. Again, over here, the art cart race. And this is Ruth Weil, I think, and she's doing a diversity thing in Gordon Park. This is called the Bagpipers of Porker Fest. I'm not sure what that one, but maybe some of you recognize Frank Seiler, the former mayor, and the author of the River West history, Tom Tolan, celebrating and what I think at that time was an OPA. And then Marina Lee and a war protest. So that's this to me shows the whole year on a spread in the paper. Politically, there's a couple things that the paper was able to do. Again, you see the neighbor spotlight, a story about absentee landlords, vacant commercial space, and Art Bar was just opening. I was just over there the other night. He's got his mini art show going. And actually, Tom Tolan told me he thought our coverage of the mayoral race in 2004 was better than some of the stuff that the Journal was doing. Again, we have T. Krulos doing a illustration. I tried to work with illustrators right from the get-go, and he's look, do we vote for the white guy or we vote for the black guy? And we have two stories and differing opinions on who should be the next mayor. Well, we all know that's Tom Barrett, who is now moving on to be ambassador to where is he going to be ambassador? But and anyways, once we get these politicians in, so it's kind of good to have a strong dialogue about where or who and how we have our elections. I got that one already. Now moving on to the 2008 issue, kind of hopping around. So when we started, we have 12 pages of black and white. And so this is kind of like the heyday in the middle of this 20 years before Facebook and all the other social media stuff put a lot of pressure on small papers. I'm still proud that we're still publishing this. It gives us an opportunity to present issues on a neighborhood level or village level, as some people would call it, that you wouldn't have, that's not going to be covered anywhere else. Local elections are real important. We had a aldermanic election, and when you have those, when Mike D'Amato retired, there's all these candidates. I think there's 7 or 8 candidates that came out for this election. And in the middle of this, you can see this little star. The question that they were asked to answer is what kind of development and what is they perceive on the corner of North Avenue and the river on the east side. That is now the a dorm, but all these candidates answered that question. In the primary, all these people ran, and Nick Kovac and Patrick Flaherty came out of the primary, and Nick Kovac is our present alderman. And that just goes to show you, so that's 2008 to 2021. He's been elected. Once you get in there, it's kind of hard to get out. I'm not saying anything negative about Nick. It's just, it's important to take these elections seriously when they come up, in my mind anyway. Sarah Farage, a lot of people know her, and she was working hard, but she didn't make it through the primary. I wrote an editorial about democracy with a little d, again, emphasizing how we should participate it. Now you can see I'm listed as a publisher, and I have a new editor, Jan Christensen. Nick Kovac was actually working for me, but I think we maintained pretty much arm's length as far as I didn't support anybody for the actual election. Further downstream was a very popular series where we just little things that were going on. Lots of these are available online, but it does give you a history. So from a historical perspective, these are very interesting to see what was going on, what happened, what still exists. Urban Ecology Center was a participant as far as giving information and stories. And Bill Bergner had a column called Ask the Ecologist, and Sarah Moore, Green Folks Garden. So we had a lot of separate columns. Again, the neighbor spotlight was always a popular, and still is a popular feature. Occasionally we do some obituary type stories, and we lost Calvin Greer, who's just to the west of Riverwest, and but he was a much loved personality in the neighborhood. More campaign stuff. The Follies, I've been doing the Follies this year. I started up again after missing it. I'm going to do it on Lindemans on November 20th. But this was an escape artist on previous year, but this was the November 8th issue of the Follies, which is a hodgepodge of entertainment, music, dancing, singing. And this year, even a little play. The Riverwest Follies is one of the things that I really did and do enjoy doing as part of the work here with the Currents. We had a lot of advertising from schools. Altera Coffee was relatively new in their location, and what is now the brewery on Center was Stonefly Brewing Company for a little while, and before that it was Anopa. Still old and dusty Blifford Lumber hadn't built their new building. Blifford Lumber, if you're familiar with it or not familiar with it, it's sort of like a meeting place. It's kind of unusual to, maybe not unusual, but it's sort of like the old corner store thing where people would come. And I meet people all the time when I go there, and I'm usually there several times a week getting something I need. Another issue that was in the news before 2004 was the dorm, which is on the west side of the river, called Riverview. A lot of debate and within the community about that dorm and what it could be. And I was very much a part of that, and that I was interested in getting the trail preserved that was the former Beer Line Railroad corridor, which we successfully do, and now we're celebrating this year 15 years of the Milwaukee River Greenway that extends from basically Humboldt Boulevard all the way up to the county line. One of my favorite writers and person was Jackie Reed Detloff. She did a column called The Garden of the Month. Jackie's still with us, but she's kind of like having a little bit of a problem with some issues, memory issues. So I do wish Jackie well. We had a lot of school advertising. You'll notice when we get into the present issue, a lot of these advertisers have been lost, partly hurt by the COVID epidemic, but also partly because of changes in how we receive and share media. Maybe not for the better, at least not from my perspective. Gensland had a cooking club that they were advertising. Sometimes it's interesting to see who's advertising to understand what is in it. Mark Kuninger, another sad story about a person who had
Yes,
some issues and is no longer with us, but
yes,
she's
and I'm experiencing the same thing.
okay. Somebody else is talking. Cafe Brooka, there's some River Westers that own that. It's now a different location. Lakefront is still with us. 4th Street Forum was a popular way of communicating about issues that I attended a number of times. The calendar was always a popular feature for the paper, and we're starting to get that again. More things are happening again in person, not just Zoom. This I thought was kind of an interesting picture. I'm on the board of, Woodland Pattern, and this was some kind of performance they had. I wish I would have seen it. It looks interesting. Woodland Pattern is just up on, and G. Willikers is still there, still running, but the owner has passed away. Nick Kovic won the election. That was covered in this one. The spaghetti benefit dinner for the co-op has been going on for years, and hopefully we have another one this January. And Outpost has been a strong advertiser ever since we started. Oh, yeah. So I'm zoomed through this, but I wanted to just show you some of the copies of the paper, and to do this in person, I would actually just have the paper, but on Zoom, I just use some PDFs that I have. I have almost all the issues in a nice record, and so does the Milwaukee Public Library have copies. I've been sending them there, and the library in Madison. So this is a pretty extensive record for the past 20 years of this neighborhood. We're doing the Follies again. This is the 15th annual at Linneman's on the 20th. And the crazy guy up in the corner is the leader of Bristlehead. And we're going to have Barbara Lee do her play, Confusadora. There she is. I can see you, Barbara. Wave again. On the 20th. She's going to be early on the schedule. So if you're interested in seeing her perform, consider coming. 104.1, really one of the few places that have a radio station. Usually they have a little story. I'll be on there going over the Follies on next Friday, because the Follies is on Saturday. Tree Moore has been writing this kind of friendly column about life and love. She lives out in the country now, but I kind of like what she writes, and I think a lot of other people do. Another Rosemary O'Hara, many of you may know her. She's been around for a long time. She's the neighbor spotlight for the 2021 issue that just came out in November. I attended this Peachtree and Mural in Pulaski Playfield, which is done by Native Americans, and the the MPS rec division. A lot of partners went there. This it's a nice little park, and they planted a white pine tree. You can see that in the picture. Plus this beautiful mural that was down there. This park has been Pulaski Playground is, if you know where it is, it's on Pulaski Street. And it's a small park with a baseball diamond. It's had a couple renovations. It's one of these MPS play fields that actually can play a very vital role. And this park is used a lot by local school kids. It's a kind of a nice place. Carrie Tara Carlson has been doing restaurant reviews for me and with me, and a little hike reviews recently. She'll start doing restaurant reviews again. This is Esterbrook Park, which is a great place. I love Esterbrook. It's not as close as Gordon Park is, and Riverside Park as far as my hikes and being out in wild. But it's good for a beer, and it's great to watch the fish, and I canoed up and down there. Nice little park, nice little story too. Okay, we turn the page here. Let's see, let's go. Okay, we got Owl, Older Wiser Local, and the schedule of events there. I was there. There was a good crowd there. That must have been Thursday, and making these little cards, which I enjoyed a lot with Darlene Hagopian. Ruth Weil, if you don't know her, she's been a very strong activist, and she works with Riverworks, which is this organization that focuses somewhat more on the north end and to the west of Riverwest. But Ruth also handles the market, which has now been on Pier Street. A friend of mine, Tom Ladwig, has got his paintings up at the art bar right now. And these are larger paintings. And then there's this whole gallery. It's worth it to go see. And you can pick up a little piece of art from anywhere from 25 to $75 or more. These are larger, so they're more expensive. And maybe many of you know Harvey Taylor, and this is his poem, Happy as Can Be. And he sent me this with a couple of pictures, and I'm glad to report that Susie and Harvey are going to be at the Follies doing their fun little gig on the 20th. This is Bristlehead practicing, and a couple turkey comics. The calendar again. And the elders have been so helpful in just sharing with me some of this, a little column. And I think Eileen and Lorraine came up with this idea of doing haikus, and they sent them in, and I found some photos that kind of went along with some of them, and along with Susan's painting at the top. Susan wrote, "Tree colors change now, winds sweep leaves drifting to earth, beautiful painting." And then she just wrote a little note that I turned into a haiku. "Perhaps I can make the beautiful trees stay while I capture the light." Let's see here. Solace, am I saying your name right? Nod your head if I am. A fond farewell. This month moon grows full, bathing leaves with silvery light, bidding them goodbye. Janine, who's on a poetry writing Wednesday group that I attend at Woodland Pattern. "Come meet me at the intersection of summer, warmth and autumn light." And Juliana, last one. "Oh, how the crow flies with myriads of snowflakes. We walk step by step." I'm very much interested in, I didn't really think of myself as a writer. My major and at the university was environmental science, 30 credits of botany. And I ended up publishing a paper. And now I'm ending up writing a lot of poetry, and I'm on the board of Woodland Pattern. So excuse me if I read you poems. One of the last pages here is kind of like my sad story of how I got to be in Riverwest. And then I'm going to try to write continually chapters about the last 20 years, sort of like in a serial book form. This is sort of the introduction. It's not so much about Riverwest, but how I got here. And it's a nice picture one over the pedestrian bridge, one of my favorite places to go hike and take a peek at the river. And in any season, it's always the same and always changing. This is facing towards North Avenue. We've had comics since the beginning, so it's been a nice relationship with them. The Art Bar has been a long-term advertiser. Sunrise Foods has been pretty good recently too. Manual Motors is where I get my car fixed. It used to be down the block in the brewery, which was really handy because my car's right out front because I just live half a block away. But Manual has done a good job for me. Outpost again has been a strong supporter, as has the Lakefront Brewery. Fishburger's Variety. I mean, it's really a nice little store and it's very popular. I'm sure I'm going to stop in there and just buy some stuff just to support their effort there. And the poetry marathon and benefit is coming up from Woodland Pattern, which is a really great thing to watch too. It's going to be done on Zoom like this is this year because of still concerns about COVID. And I think, how are we doing on time? Let's see. I'm going to stop the share. I went through that pretty quickly, but we had a little bit of a problem in the beginning, but I think I think it went okay. I guess I could be open for questions. What's that?
Can you see the chat?
I'll hit the button.
Down at the bottom, chat.
Okay, so Bruce asked me, can Bruce Wiggins, can you say what the impact of the paper has been to the neighborhood? Maybe by what other neighborhoods are without a paper, or by what Riverwest would have been without it? I mean, it's something I started. And I keep on doing it. It doesn't make any money, and if I can break even, I really am happy. But I have put a considerable amount of money into it to keep it going. People did donate this year because of the COVID epidemic. We put on a request, and I also got a small state grant, which helped us get through this year. So we're at, just to give you an idea of how the paper started. It started out as this little black and white thing and then went into a color. We got up to like about 32 pages, one of the issues I showed you. Now we're at 16. I don't like it to get any less than 16. I think 20 would be optimal. I think the Riverwest Currents played a role in identifying the neighborhood as a neighborhood. There's a lot of neighborhoods that are designated by the city, but most of them don't have such a strong identity. And I think we were helpful in creating that by being out there every month. And there's a lot of online stuff right now, but without any moderation, it doesn't tend to bring out the best of us. It seems to me anyway, that in my little opinion, is that some of the social media tends to bring out the worst of us and not focus on larger issues. So I'm going to continue to do it. And I think it has changed the neighborhood. Other neighborhoods maybe don't have as strong as an identity. There are a few other papers. There were a lot of papers being published at one time in Milwaukee. So that 20 years has been a huge change in how we get information, as you all know. There certainly wasn't any Zoom back then. I think it's been positive. I think other people think so too. So that's why I keep on doing it. Uh, somebody says there's haikus there. Yeah, it was a great pleasure to publish the haikus. Why do you think Riverwest is one of the few, the only neighborhood in that supports a local food co-op? It's 20 years ago that would be the same kind of difference between what I said about public information is you have, what the heck? I touched the screen and made something go away. Okay. Small food co-op. I think the key word is that the supports a food co-op. It's a small co-op. It's more like a corner store. And I was on the board there. I'm not on the board there anymore. And Paula, just in complete disclosure, Paula and I, my partner Paula, bought the building in order to facilitate the creation of the co-op in about 20 years ago, because they're 20 years old as well. So the co-op has this warm feeling, and at the time it opened, it was a place you could get healthier food. Now you can get healthy food at any grocery store right now, and that makes it harder for us to keep it on a smaller scale. We did open up the restaurant. People love the food, and they have a new board and they're struggling with how to keep it going. They do need our support, and I'm glad it's still there. And I'm going to try to keep it going. Why are we one of the few? Because it's not easy to do, and cooperatives in themselves are not easy to do. Making decisions in a group, believe me. Maybe that huff was as strong as I could be. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I'm going to take the spotlight off now of you.
Okay.
I do have a question. Can you tell us anything about what's happening with the Falcon Bowl bowling alley and hall?
Well, the building was put on the market. I did make a little note in the previous issue of the Currents about, hey, it's kind of a shame that the neighborhood doesn't have any say about this. It's all like, okay, who's got the money to buy it? It would be, if I just lay out what the Falcon Bowl is. The Falcon Bowl is owned by the Fraternal Order of Falcons, which still exist in different cities and including in Chicago. And they opened this building, and they owned this building many years ago. And there's sort of like an investment where you could put your money, and you'd get you get your return on your investment if you were a part of the Falcons. Now it was Polish Falcons, so it was dedicated toward the group of people that lived around there then. It's the largest hall in the Riverwest area. Normally I would be having the follies at the Falcon Bowl. I've had it there for many previous years because it's a nice big hall and it has that warm feeling. Lynn Okopinski is the owner of the bar and bowling alley, but she doesn't own the building. So the building was put up for sale and they had an accepted offer, but that seems to have kind of fallen through, partly because I don't think the parties that were trying to do this deal didn't really quite understand that the bowling alley is not owned by the building. So what do you, I mean, how do you, and that didn't maybe figure into the calculations, or some kind of misunderstanding went on. So I've been told that the building is up again and it might be the same offer, but people that are making these deals don't want to talk about it. So I can't give you a definitive answer because there is no definitive answer, and the parties that are in discussion aren't sharing that. I think Lynn, if you know her, I know her quite well because she's been a great neighbor to have across the street from the co-op. I think Lynn would like to stay there, but I don't know exactly For a while, she was talking about retiring and going living with her son, but her whole life revolves around the goings on in the bar and the bowling alley. And it's just, it would be a shame to lose it. I wish I had Mark, I wish I had a stronger answer, but we still have to watch and see what happens. Um, the worst case for me would be for the thing to be sold and be torn down and, you know, something else built there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So this is Bruce. There's one more question in the chat that got sent to me directly, so I'll just ask it. Are there any other neighborhood newspapers in Milwaukee? And specifically, what about waterfront coverage?
Water, what do you mean by waterfront?
I'm not sure. Barbara was asking that question, so maybe she can unmute if she has some specific.
Barbara Lee?
Yeah.
No, what I was asking is, there's the neighborhood news. And neighborhood news seems to cover a lot of different neighborhoods in the city. And I asked if they were covering the waterfront, as in waterfront, the whole city, not the specific waterfront. It was a metaphor.
Neighborhood News is the online version, and it's sponsored by Marquette. They do a pretty good job, but that's not really. They focus on neighborhoods, but it isn't a neighborhood based venue. I I started the Bayview Compass with Catherine Keller a number of years ago, and I believe she's still publishing it in Bayview. So that's another neighborhood that has a vestige of a newspaper going on, just like the Currents is maybe not quite what it used to be, but we're maybe getting a little bit better as we come out of COVID. There were just so many little papers that some of them were downtown oriented, but they're all gone. I don't know if some of you know of other papers that are still being published. We try to cover stuff in Harambe, but it's kind of hard when you know there's only a few people doing all the work. But actually, Ruth Wild does help bring us information from our neighbors. I remember many years ago as a statement, a 10-year-old child, a 10-year-old boy wrote into the Currents and said, this person lived on or near Holton Street. And from the mouths of the child, he said, when are the adults going to fix Holton Street? I mean, it's just really a dynamic thing. I mean, it's like, it's sort of this border that maybe is being nullified a little bit by some development that's coming up from downtown. The factors that change neighborhoods, I remember talking with Frank Zeidler or listening to Frank Zeidler, and he said, I think this was a very important lesson for me, that neighborhoods are always changing. If you ask people, which I have done, because I did strategic planning for Riverwest and the Lower East Side before I started publishing the paper, is people will say, oh, I like it just the way, like I like the River Valley. I like it just the way it is. Don't do anything. Well, if you took a picture of the River Valley every day for 120 years, you would be the most changed that you could possibly think of. It constantly changes, even in a natural way, but also the dams went in, the dams went out, the businesses were there, the businesses went out. We were swimming in the river. We couldn't swim in the river anymore because we weren't taking the sewage. I mean, it's just always, there's constant change. And Seidler, and that really stuck with me. Everything will change and you just do the best you can. And there's forces that are beyond your control. Like when they built the basketball stadium downtown, which was we had a perfectly good basketball stadium. They had to tear it down and put up this big fancy one, but it pushed all kinds of development up to the north, and that that will have some change, and maybe it'll change how Holton Street is perceived and Martin Luther King Drive is perceived. We still have a ton of work to do as far as bringing people together in our community. And hopefully publishing the Currents helps a little bit, at least make people feel like that this is a real place. I mean, and I could talk, I mean, there's just, when I started doing a little research to do this today, I just, excuse me, I saw all these things, people that have died, people that had made a difference, organizations that were here that have come and gone. It just was very impactful onto my mood and onto like, wow, this is a lot of stuff. And I went over maybe 3 issues out of what's 20 times 12, 240 issues. And all those people that were neighbor spotlights, a lot of this stuff is online. You can look up the whole paper, or I eventually promised myself and everyone else that I will put all these neighbor spotlights in a separate folder online, and I want to publish that. And I'll write a little history. A long time ago, somebody said, why don't you write a little history? So I think I'll try to I will write a little serial history of this neighborhood and ask other people to contribute as well.
Okay, are there any other questions? I have one last one. For several years, we've attended the Casimir festival in the spring. It used to be at the Falcon Bowl. Do you know if St. Casimir is going to be doing a spring festival?
I think, well, my guess is not because of COVID. And hopefully they do start that up again. It's always a lot of fun. I live 3 blocks from the church. I still enjoy listening to the bells. The question becomes, what is going to come out of our culture and our society and our neighborhoods after we finally have start to move out of this straitjacket that was COVID. It's been quite an experience. I'm 73 years old, and I just didn't think I would want to be living. I don't want to be. I'm a social person. I want to go and see people. One of the opinion writers, and actually conservative in the New York Times, said, I want to go into the bar and hear the laughter and talk of people in a bar. And that's Milwaukee as well as more than New York. I can't answer that question for sure about the Falcon and the party. And the reason I'm not having the follies at the Falcon is because I don't know what the status is. And when I usually start several months in advance, and I didn't know what was going to be happening in November. And Linneman's has been very helpful. And he's got a great stage and a great sound system. It just makes it a little bit easier for me. And we have a nice lineup, including Barbara Lee.